afternoon. Welcome, warm welcome. Can you hear me? Great.
Yes.
So super happy to be here on the second day of the Things conference. We're going to discuss one of my favorite topics, multi-connectivity, with three very experienced IoT people. So I'm not sure if I said I'm Afzal. I work for Deutsche Telekom. And now I hand over to the rest to introduce themselves.
Okay. My name is Brandon Satrom. I work for Blues. We're a hardware-forward SaaS company that offers connectivity solutions for LoRa, cellular, Wi-Fi, and satellite.
Hi, I'm Ohad Peled, and I'm an IoT consultant with many years of experience in the connectivity space, and now consulting also to Sony in part-time.
Right, my name is Patrick Noordhoek. I work for Nordic Semiconductor for the last 7 years. Been working for many years in the connectivity space as well, covering Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular, etc.
Thanks. As I said, very experienced people. So that also means, and not only experienced in IoT, but also experienced speakers. So that means that I have a lot of surprises for them today. Because, as I said, multi-connectivity is my favorite topic. So, of course, we had a prep session, we had a preparation session, and we agreed on some questions. But for the first one, I'm not going to ask a question, I'm going to make a statement. Because, the question is like we are 1 year ahead of last year's Things conference, of course. We had the same discussion, multi-connectivity. So one question would be, can we say now that there is one connectivity technology to rule them all, right? And we already know what they're going to say. I know what they're going to say. I also know what I would say if I would have been sitting in one of these chairs. And the thing is, and before I'm going to make my statement, you have to understand that in the building, next to this building, that's where I did the first Narrowband IoT Hello World back in 2017 together with Jan Willem over there. And it was the most fun time of my career because in 2017, Netherlands was the only country where you could test and try out Narrowband IoT. So I was handing out Narrowband IoT SIM cards to people from all over the world who traveled to Amsterdam. And it felt like giving candy to kids. You know? It was the most fun time of my career. So I have a very special connection with Narrowband IoT. Yeah, so I'm very neutral when it comes to my opinion about LoRaWAN. And if you concentrate this question about is there one to rule them all, if you concentrate it on only low power wide area, there are two dominant technologies in our stories and our expectations, Narrowband IoT and LoRaWAN. And even though the roots of the Things industries, the Things conference, it's LoRaWAN, right? But today you can see Nordic Semiconductors here, Ohad representing his own company, but also Sony. Blues is also from the cellular world originally. There are some MVNOs here. Yeah, and yesterday when I spoke to some people from the MVNOs, they all told me the same thing. When I speak to the solution providers and to the customers, they are tired of the story about SIM cards. They don't like it. They don't believe it anymore. Yesterday, I had a panel session here, and it was about LoRaWAN in smart cities, and I surprised the panel members with the question, do you also see a role for cellular? And on stage, they said, yes, of course. We see a role for cellular. But when we went off the stage, after the panel, they told me, but it doesn't work. And we're not sure if it's ever going to work. In some countries, there is good Narrowband IoT coverage, but we cannot get SIMs. In some countries, we can get SIMs, but there is no good coverage. So here comes a statement. Yeah, and I already said, I have a very special love for Narrowband IoT. I think in 10 years from now, LoRaWAN will be the only technology for low power wide area IoT.
I agree.
Wow.
An easy one, I agree. I think in many cases, I mean, you're going to give me an easy one, frankly. I think Narrowband IoT has served a very valuable purpose, but I think really where there's more opportunity in cellular is at midband and LTE Cat 1 Biz and LTE Cat 1, frankly. As much as I love NB-IoT and Cat M, I think that many of the challenges that you shared that customers are seeing when it comes to actual low power wide area deployments, that LoRaWAN in many cases is a superior solution. So I think in 10 years, what we'll see is that cellular finds a different niche or a broader place to play, and then other technologies, LoRaWAN, satellite, what have you, will actually serve that part of the market. I don't know if I'll have agreement from my fellow
Well,
panelists.
I say first things first, 26 September 2034, I'm going to mark in my calendar to check the status. That's the first thing. My answer is, honestly, I don't know, right? I mean, it depends on a lot of factors. I think today we see, and I'm taking this broader than NB-IoT, there's also LTEM, there's Cat1 bis, yeah, Cat1 as you mentioned. All of those can be considered LPWAN technologies because all of them have the certain power features and can support different use cases for this. So it's more about the way I see it today, at least, between public and private networks. So today, LoRaWAN is a great solution, but its a majority is in the private network space, which cellular is kind of trying to enter, but it has its own struggles, and the other way around with cellular, right? Because cellular is a public network with its own issues, but it doesn't have the private part of it. So I see this as very complementary today. And it depends. If LoRaWAN breaks into the public networks and kind of provides comparable coverage like the cellular side, or at least wide enough area, let's say, then it's definitely a possibility. But given the current deployments, I'd say the infrastructure that is already there is very valuable. We often, we come up with new technologies and new infrastructures, but utilizing what we have today, in many cases, can solve problems. So, yeah, my answer is we'll see.
Patrick?
Yeah, I understand. The answer is no. There are use cases for LoRaWAN. There are use cases for cellular, in my opinion. There's overlapping areas, and I think we shouldn't forget emerging technologies like, for example, the DECT Plus kind of connectivity solutions. We should not skip the NTN kind of solutions that pop up these days and get more and more traction. So is there a place for LoRa? Absolutely. It has a use case. It's there. But there's a lot more areas, and it's all use case dependent, in my opinion. And that's where you see the rollout. And then we're only talking about the long range kind of solutions. The shorter range kind of things like Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, Thread, whatever pops up there is present as well. Yeah. So, mix.
Okay. But let's stick to long range for a moment, okay?
Long range is fine. Yeah.
Ohad, you were just differentiating between private networks and public networks. But to be honest, I think that the definitions of these two different types of LoRaWAN networks, they're coming closer to each other. Because when in the cellular world, and we are all originally cellular guys, when we were discussing LoRaWAN, we always said private networks, private networks, private networks, and that meant very specific, limited areas, like 1 or 2 buildings which are next to each other, or a very specific area of farmlands, or maybe one very specific area for industrial IoT, right? But as I said yesterday, I've learned that there are also LoRaWAN networks, citywide LoRaWAN networks, and that was a big surprise to me. So if citywide is possible, then nationwide is also a possibility. So I cannot name any use case anymore that is not like low power, that is not possible on LoRaWAN. Can you name some? Like which ones are very typical for Narrowband IoT and not possible on LoRaWAN?
Dynamic kind of environments beyond the city, next country. Try to cover that with LoRa. You won't, yeah. So all the kind of tracking applications is not going to fit. And yes, that's long range. So if you're in a specific area, the farmer with his cows, the city, the village tracking trash cans, whatever, great applications for LoRa, absolutely. If you go beyond specific areas, beyond your, let's say, control, I've got the feeling you need to switch to alternatives.
Okay.
like to jump in here. I don't know to say that technically something is impossible, but just back to the definition of the private networks, the way I see it is a little bit different. Not necessarily around area or region, but it's more about the solution provider. When it comes to to provide the solution, does he need to take care of infrastructure? Yes or no? That's, to me, if he needs to make sure the infrastructure is there, it's a private network because he owns it. Yeah. If not, then it's a public network, and you really see the difference when cellular-based devices are being deployed or launched. They don't. Yeah, of course, they need to discuss with the MNOs, the operators, to make sure that the coverage is there, but they don't have anything to do with the infrastructure, right? So there are a lot of citywide, not a lot, but there are a few citywide solutions and even nationwide, here in NL. But I guess the question would be, if that's the case, why do we not see more of the public network model in LoRaWAN? Yeah, I mean, that's to me, it's a little bit of a mystery still.
Okay, very interesting insights. Let's see, 10 years from now, let's meet here again. So enough about the big match between Narrowband IoT and LoRaWAN. We do see lots of multi-connectivity solutions today. I mean, look at yesterday's launch of the gateway, the LoRaWAN gateway with cellular connectivity as backhaul. But Brandon, last year you also launched an awesome product here, which was also contributing to the multi-connectivity story. Can you say something about that?
Yeah, last year what we did at Blues was we launched the first of our many products that actually have multiple radios in a single device. So cellular plus Wi-Fi was the first of those. And the thinking that we have and what we've heard from many of our customers is that a lot of times if you have a mobile device or even a fixed device, you can't guarantee that you're only going to have that one kind of connectivity at all times. In many cases, Wi-Fi and cellular are a great match because you may need to provision a device in a factory and then deploy it out in the field, or you may be in a case where you have Wi-Fi 80% of the time, but you need cellular for that 20% and still have a connection to the cloud, still have a connection to the internet. And we've seen the same thing with LoRa, with Wi-Fi itself, and even satellite, which is another product that we announced early this year, was to give customers the ability to target multiple radio access technologies without having to tie themselves into a rat at the beginning of a process and just be stuck there, right? I mean, I think one of the challenges and one of the ways that we've made this whole space too complicated is by forcing developers to pick a rat and stick to it because it's so complicated to just work with LoRaWAN or just work with cellular, that once you've made that decision, you might as well just not change it. You're incented not to change it. And so what we wanted to provide was to recognize the need in the industry to support multiple rats on a single form factor on a single platform without having to tie people in.
And how's it going so far?
It's been going great so far, frankly. I mean, I think the fact that we added satellite earlier this year was a signal that we've seen really great response from customers and a lot of interest in having multiple connectivity options, not just in a single PCB where you have to embed a bunch of radios, but actually having a single module that supports multiple connectivity options.
Cool, and Nordic Semiconductor, Patrick, is doing also lots of different IoT connectivity modules these days. Can you maybe share some real-life experiences where these real-life solutions are being used?
Real-life examples, it's what I see daily. Customers don't come in for just one connectivity device, yeah? Yes, there is usually one long-range solution, because that's the most complex one to integrate, and that's the biggest decision for a use case, typically. And then the next question is, what do I need more? Is it the Wi-Fi connection because of some local connectivity? Is it Bluetooth because I need to connect to a mobile phone? Or I need to provision the device in a factory or some other location? So it's all about the use case, and then you start to figure out which ones do I need. Adding 2 connectivity devices for long range adds a lot of complexity, not only just the device, it adds cost, it adds certification complexity. So basically those are the kind of things people don't, it takes time and effort, basically. So you pick one and not just 2, or they build 2 different devices that actually do the same, but have just a different long-range connection. So it's all over the place. I can say examples, yes, trackers are a great example. Low power has to be there. Yes, they need a Wi-Fi solution for checking access gateways around them for locationing, etc. So yeah, it's there and it's there to stay. So never a single one.
Ohad?
Yeah, so I can refer to what we see in Sony, and that's, I think it's along the same lines as Blues has done on the form factor. We're trying to do on the single die, and that enables basically a connectivity of sub-gigahertz alongside cellular. In terms of use cases, I think the most evident one we see today that is using multiple technologies is the smart metering space. Yeah, so we see this. There's need there both for cellular and for sub-gigahertz connectivity. There's plenty of proprietary and other protocols in the sub-gigahertz space, but I think it has the potential to really complement very well any solution, because if you started to look at the broader use case, right, for metering, so there's the electricity meter in every house, but there's also other types of meters. And then if you can combine the shorter range, let's say, connectivity or a non-cellular connectivity between the other devices and a single device which would also act as a gateway, then it becomes interesting. That's one example. The other example is taking a multitude of nodes, and if you have the capability of dual connectivity, theoretically and practically, essentially you could decide for each node whether it's going to be a gateway, kind of a low resources gateway, if you will, or it's going to be an end node on the meshed network. So, and this topology can ideally even be configured dynamically, right? So, and that saves a lot in installation, deployment, and total cost of ownership, right? So that's how I see this.
Cool. And if you look at those solutions where, like yesterday launch was different. It's like you extend or you use cellular as backhaul for LoRaWAN sensors, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is a trend that, for example, I think it was Onomondo. Yeah, they are cellular IoT companies. They provide cellular connectivity, and I saw that they are now offering something which allows you to use LoRaWAN, where you don't have the proper cellular coverage for your IoT device. And like that, there are here some companies who offer satellite connectivity where you don't have LoRaWAN coverage.
Right.
What kind of challenges do you see for these kind of multi-connectivity solutions?
I think the biggest challenge that I see is the economics of one solution versus the other. I think even if we give people multiple radios that solve a single problem, you mentioned satellite in particular, in cellular, we're now talking about the cost of megabytes in data, but satellite, you're talking about the cost for kilobytes of data because the factor of cost, the units are totally mismatched, right? And so you have to plan that for the application that you're building, or find a module that provides some set of data that's bundled with the device itself. I mean, you're talking about different unit economics as you switch from one to the other. So for a product builder, you have to be cognizant of, okay, what's the cost of incorporating this radio into my device versus the cost of what I was paying before versus the cost of this other, thing that may be free, whether it's LoRa or Wi-Fi or something along those lines. So that's one aspect.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think it's a major one. There are plenty of challenges. My ideal would always be when I look at our cell phones, right? When you're at home, it's over Wi-Fi. When you're outside, it's over cellular. Today, it's seamless.
Yeah,
but it wasn't always this way.
Yeah.
It was challenging, and I remember the times where I needed to kind of switch between cellular and Wi-Fi. So along the same lines, if we're talking about end-to-end, LoRaWAN, cellular, all has its own challenges, and combining them together, it's combining challenges as well. If you look at, for example, the cellular side kind of solved in a way the global SKU, right? So you have like one SKU and you can go with it all around the world. That is not possible with LoRaWAN or in, it's different frequencies. You could design a hardware that supports all of them, but it's more complicated. Of course, there are the security aspects that each protocol has its own, and you need to kind of worry about all of them. And if we look at NTN side, there's, I think, still room to grow for the ecosystem there to justify the actual connectivity. So I think each protocol comes with its own set of challenges, and combining them means also combining challenges, basically.
Patrick?
Yeah. connectivity to satellite is mostly, it's early days. Cost is mostly the deciding factor, I would say, as I heard before. Complexity of certification, reaction times, depending on what type of satellite connectivity you use. Coverage. I mean, if you really say my tracker has a fallback to satellites, you have to make sure that there's actually satellite coverage in the area where you expect this fallback.
Right.
So that's to be taken into account. Yeah.
And do you think it's easy enough for OEMs and hardware developers to find the right components that are ready for multi-connectivity?
I mean, I think the industry is progressing. I think we're doing a better job of building products. And Blues is not the only example. Nordic is doing the same thing. Sony is attempting to do the same thing as well. Is that we're giving developers better guardrails by radios and modules and even dies that support multiple together. And so you have that leg up already. Now, it's not just the hardware. I mean, we're big believers that you also need to have an harmonized API and an abstraction across those connectivities as well, so developers don't always have to choose their connectivity. Somewhat can be sensible defaults, but I think we've made a lot of progress instead of sending people down a path of giving them options in the devices that they have.
Yeah, I'll just refer to what Patrick started with saying, and it's all use case dependent, right?
Yeah.
So I really think that once the use cases would become very evident for multi-connectivity, then the solutions for that would also kind of flow. Because what we see today is trying to enable what we think makes sense in terms of multi-connectivity, and hopefully some use cases can take advantage of it and can bring value out of it. But honestly, I don't think technically hardware or platforms is the problem right now. There are ways to implement your use case, even if you don't have the dedicated hardware with multi-connectivity, you can always use two different devices to implement what you've done, like many other clients and customers are doing today.
But I mean, then you're referring to smaller use cases, right? Where you have to, okay.
So I think if this is, talking about trackers, for example, like the very big vertical, tracker itself can be divided to many more, right? But if you look at logistics tracker, for example, and the conclusion is, or we see a grow in the NTN ecosystem to the level that it really guarantees coverage where cellular cannot guarantee, and there's good collaboration between the operators on the cellular space and the NTN service provider. So I think that's a plus. If you see this happening, then there will be solution dedicated for that with cellular and NTN connectivity, which would guarantee global, worldwide, or Europe-wide, or America-wide type of coverage.
Thank you. Anything to add? Any last words,
Yep.
Patrick?
There's a lot of different teams that have to look the same direction if you want to solve this. It's the operators, it's the VMNOs, it's the hardware makers, and we all focus on the big numbers. Yeah, quantity is what we count. You want to sell a lot of whatever you build, and basically that defines whether something can be successful. Maybe we don't have it right now, but it's about when it's ready to be launched. When is it economically feasible to launch products in this kind of market in big quantities? Then you need to be ready with your hardware, software, and operators and everyone else around it, and that is what counts. Mm-hmm. So,
thanks. We've reached the end of our session. And I really enjoyed it, especially since what I told you, they were unprepared for the first statement. So I think you did it very well.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot. And see you soon.
Thanks, Afzal.
Thank you, Afzal.